Hey, good evening and welcome back. I wanted to continue with what I was talking a little bit about last week on shellac and how to finish it. Now, of course, one of the great secrets that many of you heard me mention is never rush a finish. That was Pugmore's, one of his. And that's probably more important when I was in a humid state like North Carolina, because finishes didn't dry quite as quickly, and it's a real issue if you're applying another coat over one that hasn't really fully cured enough to receive that secondary coat. So right at this time of year in New Hampshire, it is super dry. And I have a little heater going. I actually have like a propane assistant heater here. So that actually puts a little more moisture in the air, which is kind of good. But everything's drying super fast. I've got this 1.5 pound shellac on this base. Now, some of you might recognize this. I've shown this earlier. This is a little contemporary version of a shaker candle stand. It skips the whole part where you need to turn the center column and the legs dovetail up into that column. I think we talked about that recently. And actually, that was with the turning group, I believe. But this is a center hexagonal column that I have in the center here. And I just used floating tenons into that hexagonal column to make quite a strong structure here, and very light. It has similar lines to a shaker candle stand, which is actually just a small round table. They were called candle stands because it was a good height to set your candle by the bedside or whatever, do some reading, and just pretty handy. And to this day, because it sits right at about 24 inches high, it's ideal right next to a sofa. It sits just about the perfect height to set down your drink or to light a candle. But who does that anymore, right? Except a Yankee candle in our house. But anyway, I am going to show you what to do to this finish. Now, you might look at it and say, hey, that looks pretty good to me. And it doesn't look bad, but this is the ebonizing finish that we talked about a few Sharp Night Lives ago. If you're interested, you can check that out. We tested different methods for ebonizing wood, and this base is actually ash. It's from the tree behind the shop, that 185-year-old tree that we've looked at a couple times. So you'd never know it outside of getting close and looking at the grain. It's very straight and it's porous, similar to oak. Are you seeing that? Zooming right in.
Oh, you want me to? Okay.
Oh, I thought you were.
I didn't know if I was going to be able to see it, but I certainly can.
Maybe not. I don't know if you can even see. Can you see the grain?
Yeah, actually.
Are you getting a glare?
We sure can.
Okay, so you can see that linear grain, and it's running right down kind of the angle of the leg for strength. And it's nicely ebonized. And then I put 3 coats of that 1.5 pound shellac. And the last one, I put a little heavier. It's not a bad idea for your last coat to go up to 2 pounds cut. See, that's a little secret I didn't share last week. But you can do the 1.5 pounds. But that last one, you just don't want to puddle it on there. So what looks nice is there's no runs. It's laid out pretty sweetly, but it has kind of a harsh, shiny glare to it. You know, shellac just has that in a way. So what you want to do is, the real secret to great finish is finishing the finish. So many times, when I started out, I was thinking, why doesn't this look right? I would brush on a finish, you know, in my basement in Lowell, Mass. I go, what's wrong? And there'd be a bug on it the next morning, and you know, all kinds of dust from I was in the cellar, with a dirt floor. What was I expecting? But anyway, very frustrating. And I thought, what's wrong with this? I've seen really nice finishes at the store. What's going on? Well, it turns out very, very few finishes are good right off the brush, the wiping pad, or the spray gun. They have to be finished or rubbed out to a finer surface and a finer sheen, whatever you were after. So I'm going to start with this one, and I'm just going to show you my method for doing that with shellac. We did it a little bit last week, but I didn't really get to show it enough. Now, what I'm going to rub this out with is steel wool eventually, but I like to hit it first with a piece of beat down 320 grit. It takes off any of the dust nibs that might be retaining, and look at how this powders up. I wanted you to see that too. That's a clear sign that this shellac is really nice and dry. And I actually used some of that new stuff that I mixed up on this. And then the last coat I put on some of that clear shellac I got from Zinsser, which was super fresh. It was only a couple months old, so that dried beautifully. So this is all I want to do is just lightly knock off any of the nibs. Like by nibs, I just mean those little specks of dust that might fall on it. What's great is when you have a fast drying finish like shellac that we sprayed on, and it was dry to the touch in probably about 10, 15 minutes. But then you have to let it dry I usually let it go at least 2 hours, even in the driest weather, before I'll put on another coat. And usually limit the coats to about 3 a day, maybe 4 if it's really good. But try not to rush it, you know. Some other finishes you can lay on more, like lacquer, you can push that a little harder, but that's a tougher finish to spray because of all the VOCs, and the lacquer thinner is just a harsh material. All right, so I've already hit those, and then I would lightly hit this area. Now, one of the keys to finishing material like this that has a stain on it is be very subtle on the edges. I did break these edges when I sanded it, but if you hit it with the edge sanding, you're more than likely going to sand through and cut through the surface and the color, and you're going to have a white line there. So, because we've got ash underneath. So I've got to be really careful just to subtly bend the paper but not cut the corners. And
Was that scary? This is my question. Was that scary the first time you applied sandpaper to your beautiful shiny finish?
Scary? Yeah, I had to think about it about 20 minutes.
Well,
No, it wasn't.
takes the
No,
soul.
I've done it enough that I probably the first time it was, but I've got, this is pretty gentle paper. I wouldn't go with, anything lower than 320 and use the beat down stuff that you might have used when you were sanding it. And then you could go with 400 as well.
So just to confirm, Evan's asking, does the shellac need to be dry to the touch or to touch to recoat or cured?
No, I would let it go longer. Even though it's dry to the touch, it's not really dry. What I mean is you could handle it, but if you pressed your finger into it, you would probably make a fingerprint. The way I usually tell is by when you go to lightly sand it, if it's powdering up, it's good and dry. If it's gummy or it's purling up and you can feel it. It's not really dry for another coat. That's what I like for before recoating, is making sure it's kind of powder sanding. And then you're handling, you couldn't press a fingerprint into it after it dries for a couple hours or maybe more if it's a humid day, And also, I'm putting it on with a 1.5 pound cut. If you're going heavy, which I don't recommend, you're going to have to wait even longer, and that would be falling into the category of rushing a finish, which we don't do. All right,
Pretty lashes. Oh my goodness.
I'm not going to do this whole thing. I just wanted to show you a little bit of that. Now, the second step is rubbing it out with steel wool. So I'm going to take one of these steel wool pads. You can go right to the steel wool, but a lot of times the steel wool won't take the dust nibs. So it gets caught and it doesn't really work well on them. some problematic ones. That's why I just lightly go over really quick with the sandpaper. And then when you steel wool, it's just smooth sailing. You could try it on some. If you feel it's really great, you can just go right to the steel wool. But this is what I was shooting for anyway, to go to this point. So I'm trying to stay close off the edges here. But what you want to do, you can really kind of bear down on this. I'm always putting it so I can see the light bouncing off. I'm getting rid of the shininess. Right? I just want to see a very even, dull, matte finish appearance on there. And it gets quite nice. Let's do a leg. Okay, this is good. I'll do this one here. So this one will be left undone on this side, and you'll be able to see the difference. So I'm going to do the center column. I've been thinking about this table design. I can't really leave it alone. I'm trying to
Are you going to do plans? I have a couple of questions about that.
tweak it. Yeah, I am going to do plans. I'm glad to hear somebody likes this. Wait till you see this thing. I think it's going to be pretty sweet. What's that?
Keep going if you're
Okay. I'm tweaking the design, but I tried one difference, and it wasn't as good as this, but I've been thinking about other methods, but sometimes simplest is best. With a base like this, there is a way you could start with a round, like if you could turn just a cylinder, and then set it up to create flats with a jig, but that gets complicated. So maybe we won't do that.
Joe's asking if 6/0 wool, I'm assuming 6/0 is 6/0 wool, available anymore. He had some years ago, he said.
Joe, wow, I've never seen that. I thought the finest was always 4/0. But, there are these synthetic abrasive pads, the 3M and the Scotch Brights. They get pretty fine. I think there was a golden one that would get down to this, but I'm not, maybe somebody can pitch in or chime in. I don't use that enough to know what's the equivalent to 4/0 steel wool, but you could use that stuff, but I don't know, some of it doesn't feel like it cuts quite as effectively, and in some cases it's good, but I don't know, I just stick to the old tried and true. So now I want to show you the difference. Like right now, look at how that's an even matte, really dull, but if you could feel this, it is so silky smooth. Even this surface, it's unbelievable. Compared to that, I've got a little graininess to that feeling, but this is just ultra smooth. Now, it's almost like you've created a French polish, but French polish has a brighter sheen. But it is absolutely smooth. Now, the grain is not filled. You're seeing actually the dust of the sanding going into the grain, which is kind of an interesting effect, but that will disappear once we clean it off. So I would do this whole thing, and then I would apply some wax. So let me just show you. Let's just do it. I dust it off quickly. And it's just the shellac dust, and see it all comes off mostly out of the pores. And now it's ready for waxing. So I'm going to wax this one side. Now, I like to use either this brie wax, which is paste wax, a little more. It's kind of nasty smell-wise, the solvent's in there. But it's really great on small things like this. It won't streak as much. You never use this on the top of something, but since I got this stuff, I'm going to use this for a change. This is lemon oil and beeswax, and it's the Goddard's Cabinet Maker's Wax. Now, it also comes in this form where you got the regular spray bottle, but this is the aerosol. It's the same product.
We're getting some questions about where to find that. They're saying Amazon and Home Depot are sold out. Do you have any other thoughts?
Oh, really? I went to TJ Maxx, or is that what the place is there? What's that place where you buy our clothes?
Yeah.
TJ Maxx, yeah. I went in there and I found it there. I have found it at Bed Bath & Beyond before, but I don't know. I was just searching for it one time, so that's too bad. But the Brie Wax is a good substitute too, but the only problem is the Brie Wax is not great on the top because it does get a little streaky. Another substitute you can use is the Guardsman, this one here. So the camera lady's reading. It's anytime clean and polish for wood furniture. This is has no silicones. This is pretty nice product too. I'm not sure that it has. I don't think it has beeswax in it the same way. But
what's it called again?
Guardsman.
Guardsman. Okay.
It's the company, but it's clean and polish. Anytime clean and polish for wood furniture. So let me just show you a little of this. I'm going to spray a little on here. I'll just go up this side. And then, I do the whole thing. And then just polish it up. Now, the oil is going to be there for a few minutes. And then it sort of goes away. And it leaves this fine film of beeswax, which gives it this nice, soft luster. So you can see the graininess on the surface.
Yeah.
The pearliness. It's kind of rough still right off the gun. Now I'm going to turn the other side so you can see it in the glare. Look how much, I don't know if you can pick it up, but that feels so silky and smooth compared to that. Very different, and it's very quick because the shellac has that nature to it. And that is so subtle and sweet, really nice. So that's what you want to do. Now let me get out my other base that I've already fully steel wooled. I'm going to get that dust off. I mean, I have touch-up markers. Usually I'm using this kind of like a nutmeg brown for most everything. But with black, you don't need a special marker. You can use almost any marker you have. So let me throw a little of this on here. It does such a nice job.
Yeah, they wanted to see the bottom of the table, turning it upside down. Maybe
this here?
There. I'll get close to that.
Oh yeah, that's where I had to do that little carved detail. I just cut it in to create that. It was flat across there, but with that cut, it makes a nicer finish up into the column.
Star Trek look.
Yeah. So these tables, as I said in my notes, are Christmas gifts. I gave the tops to the kids at Christmas, and I told them that I was making the bases, and I thought I would have it ready, but then they would have had to fly home with it, and that wasn't going to work. So we're going to ship these out in some boxes that will ship fairly reasonably.
What is causing the hard specks of shellac that sticks to my sandpaper when I sand between coats, and how to prevent it?
Oh, hey Mark, that's a good question. Well, actually, that's a sign that it won't happen as much if it's fully dry. But here's a great tip. That's annoying to me too. That happens a lot. Like what Mark's talking about is if you sand a flat surface and you have a block. Usually, I'm imagining you have some type of block because you are building up a little heat when you do that, and so the shellac reacts to that a little bit. If it's not really cured powder, then it will pearl up, and you get those little pearls and then they start making lines, and you start seeing them. Well, as soon as I see one of those, it's a good idea to have a little scrub brush like this. I actually bought one, and it was long, and I cut it in half on the bandsaw. And so I got 2 of these, and I keep it with me. And if you have this scrub brush, it's got the regular bristles, just go like that, and you knock them right off. And so it's a way to clean your sandpaper from getting clogged when you're rubbing out a finish. It doesn't work all the time, but in most cases when I'm rubbing out a finish, if I start getting that pearliness in the paper, just that, scuff it right over, you're good to go. So it could be that your shellac is getting old, or you're not giving enough time, or you have more on there. You'll get less of that if you have really good dry shellac and you're spraying it at a 1.5 pound thickness. All right, so I'm going to set that there. Now, before I get off to shellac, I wanted to move to rubbing out a varnish.
Do you do the 320 plus steel wool between every coat of shellac or only after the last coat?
Oh, good question. That's just the last coat. Usually between coats, I'll just very quickly hit it with the 320 or finer. Sometimes, I'll spray 2 coats of shellac on right off without doing that because you get a little build. It's an evaporative finish. So what happens is each successive coat actually melts into the previous coat. It doesn't melt it fully, but it melts into it. So if you have little specks on the surface, theoretically, those specks are shellac in many cases. They're not actually dust all the time. Like the roughness might just be the overspray of the shellac. So when you spray another coat, that melts in, no big deal, right? But sometimes it is specks of things, and I find I get a little smoother result by just quickly hitting it. But you can put on the first couple coats without sanding between. Then I would lightly hit it with the paper, and then hit my 3rd coat, and then go to the steel wool. Occasionally I'll steel wool and put on another one. You will actually see a nice result. You can't really sand too fine with shellac because that next coat melts in. However, if you're dealing with varnishes, you got to be careful how fine you sand because they are reactive finishes and they need to cure and harden and they don't melt into the next coat. So by sanding too fine, you don't give the next coat a place to grab. By roughing it up a little bit, you give it some tooth for that next coat to really latch onto. But it'll always tell you on the varnish can, don't sand finer than a certain grit, because that's what they're talking about. It's a reactive finish. But that's one of the great things I love about shellac. It's really friendly to use, and you get exceptional results in a very short time. I wanted to show you guys really quickly the difference between a rubbed out drawer front and a non-rubbed out drawer front. While you were gone last week, or since last week, I actually got all the shellac on this chest of drawers that I want, and it's ready for the final rub out. The top, I need to put a little more varnish on the top, but my plan is to finish this out next week, if we can have it finished out and actually do our last thing. So here's the drawers. They're coated with shellac on the inside, but the fronts have about 3, maybe 4 coats of a 1.5 pounds. And I switched the last coat to clear because I had enough amber color. And if you go too much with the orange shellac, you start to push it to look orangey. And I wanted just that amber tint. So you got to just kind of make a judgment call there and decide when you've got it. Now, I'm going to just very lightly go over with the beat down 320. That's good. And now I'm going to steel wool this, but as I showed last week, unroll your pad if you don't have the flat kind of steel wool, and I wrap my felt block with it, so I end up with a nice flat kind of surface. And I'm going to do this so you can see it. And I'm just going to really burnish this. And again, I'm going for that satin finish on there. And I can see when I'm looking to see that nice, even, matte finish. So you can only go so far with the pad, and then get rid of it, and I'll get a regular one. And I'm going to go around the bead, get it right in there. I want to clean that off nicely. It has a shiny look of the pearled up shellac, so you really want to get all of that looking like a dead matte finish. You know it's going to come back to life when you hit it with the wax. And it just looks spectacular. So, there we go. So that's good. And I'm going to go right across this end here because I didn't quite get all the way to the end. And then I'll go out. I always want to use the steel wool even with the grain. I hate going across the grain if I don't have to, but right there at the end, you kind of have to in front of the bead, and then you can pull it out straight with the grain from there, and it will be, you won't see any. It's pretty hard to pick up that you've gone across the grain, but you can see it sometimes. All right, there we go. I'm going to get a little, let's try this one if I got any left. Yes, I do. Let me get that on there. And this is just the regular, this is the same product, just the other bottle. And it's giving me the,
So pretty.
can you see it pretty well? Mm-hmm. So it's giving a beautiful luster there. Let's put it into the chest. And I don't know if you can pick up the difference on this one. I don't think you can. But it's just rough and pearly, and this is silky smooth. So just a little teaser for next week when we finish this. We're going to put this kind of hardware on each of the drawers. So you get that golden brass color. It's a nice complement to the gold highlights in the walnut there.
Yeah, you can see a difference between
You can?
the two. Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Yeah, you've got this kind of shocking, glaring, shiny. This gives you this, I think of it as a soft gloss. It's really right between satin. It's hard to say. It's like a satiny gloss, but it's the target. To me, it's the ultimate in like this type of furniture. You want it to have that type of sheen. Mm-hmm. Too harsh a shine, it looks cheap and unfinished. And that's why you're finishing the finish to get professional results. All right, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the top, and this is going to be, this is one of the tops. The two boys get this radiant Cuban mahogany sunburst, and I did ebonize the bottom, and I've got shellac on the bottom there, so I've got the same issue there. I'm going to just quickly, I'll just do a little of
You
this.
used an HVLP gun to spray those, right?
Yes, I did. All right, so the bottom underside here, I just sprayed shellac. I ebonized it. This was cherry veneer. It's kind of a shame, but I just thought it would look nicer if everything had that kind of flat, finished black look as you look under this.
Would it be good for me to ask some questions?
I don't think
while
the
you're doing
shakers
that?
would do that. Yeah, sure. I can do a couple.
Okay. This is, now be mindful, this is back when you were talking about the shellac stage of things, right?
Okay.
So Douglas is asking, should you use a lubricant with the steel wool?
That's optional, Doug. It's if you're going for like a flat surface, sometimes I'll use that wool lube. It does help in some cases, but most of the time when I'm using this, like being on a pad like that, on like the sides of that chest, I won't use the wool lube. I'll just burnish it out. The problem with the wool lube, I don't like using it all the time, is because once you use it, it's, by the way, that's a product from, I think it's Mohawk that is the only one who makes it. Maybe somebody else does now, but I have some downstairs. And it's like a soapy gel. And you add a little water in that gel, and you start using it, and you get like a soapy, slick kind of lubricant while you're rubbing out. The problem I have with it, I mean, it works great, but you have to wipe it off and let it kind of flash off and dry before you can see if you did the whole thing. It's hard to tell where you missed and where you might have to go a little further. That's why I prefer to just go dry with it, because I can see right off when I have created that nice flat black appearance. However, there are times when the wool lube will help you, if you have a top that you want to just go right off of the gun, off of the wipe.
You may have answered this already. I think you did at one point, but Tracy was asking, can you do this shellac, I assume she's talking about the steel wool process with, or it could be he, sorry, Tracy, poly and varnish finishes. Can you do this for poly and varnish?
Not necessarily. Certain ones, which I'm going to move into now. I want to show you the method for, this is a tung oil varnish top. Now, tung oil is a resin that is favorable to rubbing out with steel wool and abrasives like that. Polyurethane is a very hard resin. That's why, it's almost bomb-proof, and a lot of people like to use it on a very protective setting. There are some polyurethane blends. They'll have some polyurethane, and sometimes like an alkyd varnish, which is softer, and so they'll have these various blends of resins, which are more favorable to rubbing out. So it depends on the particular product you're using. On here, that's one of the reasons you've heard me recommend a lot Waterlock's polymerized tung oil, because it rubs out beautifully and is very water resistant, like polyurethane. And it just looks way better than the results you can get with polyurethane. Polyurethane is good in certain situations, but if you want a beautiful piece of furniture, it's not the best. So some Waterlocks, that type of tung oil varnish, there are some by General Finishes as well. I always forget. They changed the name on it. I think it's Royal Finish. Someone will know. But that's a varnish blend. It does have some urethane in it, but it's not straight poly, so it does work well.
Ron's asking if the speed of your strokes impacts the heat you create that damages the finish. Should I go slower to keep the heat from building up?
What are we talking about, the shellac? The purling up with the shellac?
This is a question just now. So what you were just doing, I think it refers to when you're rubbing that.
Yeah, move around. You don't want to stay too long. This is powdery. I'm not generating enough heat. I'm not getting any kind of gumming up or anything like that. But yeah, you don't want to stay in one area too long, but you don't have to, because you're burnishing it quickly enough. Now, with a varnish finish, I wiped on a thin coat here. I wasn't really preparing to do this, but I'm probably going to put one more coat on these tops. But I wiped on a thin coat, the last one, and I thought I could just get away with lightly sanding and then rubbing out. But one of the risks with rubbing out varnishes is the dreaded rub through. And what I mean is, how I was talking about successive coats with varnishes are reactive finishes. They don't melt into the next coat. So you would think that you could rub just fine. And if you went through that most recent coat, like say you went from the third coat down into the second coat, and you rubbed it away, that you wouldn't be able to see that, but you do see it. It's weird. It gives you like this halo, and you see like a different sheen. And it's really a bummer when it happens, because you're like rubbing, you think you're getting the beautiful thing. You might spend too much. You just go back to just get that little bit better, and you're like just hitting it. And then you go to polish it, and you see this weird little halo. You go, oh no. There's no way of like rubbing that out to make it disappear. So, you know what you have to do. You know what you have to do. You have to sand it to that grit and put on another coat on the whole thing. And here's the key. With varnishes, that tip that Pug gave me, never rush a finish. Well, that applies to never rush rubbing out the finish as well. If you want to get the very best results on rubbing out shellac and varnish, but mostly I'm talking about varnishes, you really need to wait a week at least, okay? Because it'll just be less and less likely to streak, and it gets more cured. So you're less and less likely to rub through. So that's also the hard lesson. If you didn't put enough varnish on that last coat, then you could rub through. And so imagine if you waited a week and you were so excited to get it finally rubbed out, and during that rub out you went through that coat of finish, that means you got to put another coat on. So you've just kind of wasted a week. Not really, because you gave yourself more protection with the finish, but it's frustrating. And there have been times I've had to call clients and say, I'm sorry, but I had planned to come, the next day or two, but I got an issue and I want to have it right. I want to have it right for you. And so I'm going to... It was so upsetting. Like, I come in sometimes, you need to deliver this because you needed the paycheck too. So that's when it gets even worse.
Amen to that.
You remember that?
I
Once or twice?
Do I remember?
Once or twice, especially when it happens late at night. It's like a nightmare.
After 35 years?
Yeah. So anyway, here's the tip. Make sure you get your last coat of varnish on there adequately. I would brush on. If you're just wiping a thin coat, that's not safe enough. If you're going to do this step where you're going to really rub out the varnish, brush it on. And I still do thin the varnish a little bit, like 10%, so it'll lay out better. You won't have the brush marks as much if you cut it a little bit with mineral spirits. So then when you go to sand it, the first thing you have to do is level the finish. So you've got the brush marks. You have to create an even, smooth surface. Because if you go right to the steel wool or a finer polishing compound, if it is not level, you're going to see that even better after the steel wool. But if you level it, you end up with this gorgeous, smooth surface that just looks ultra precise, ultra beautiful. It's just, the luster of it is really sweet. However, you'll see brush marks if you don't do this step where you're leveling it. Now, I went through a lot of advice in magazine, like reading different tips about how to rub out a finish, and many of them, I wonder if they actually did it much, would say start with 600 grit or 400 grit wet dry paper, 600 grit, and then go to 1,000 and then 1,500. Well, there's two problems with that. With something like 600 grit or 800, you're actually more abrasive, so you're taking off more of that finish, risking going through. So you want to, and then the other problem is that those scratches, you have to sand with the next grit to remove those scratches, or else you see them after your final polishing or steel wooling. So what I've learned is do not start with a coarse grit like 800. The best grit to start with is 1,200 grit. Start with it and you finish with it. It takes you a little bit longer, of course, to get a matte than 800, but you don't have to do several steps, and you don't have to sweat about having taken off too much material and getting a rub through. So actually, I don't have any 1,200 with me right now, but I have 1,500.
After all that.
But
Do as I say, not as I do.
No, this is not bad. This is actually, if you're going to miss finer. Don't go more coarse, all right? So I didn't even have to tell you that. I'm just too honest about this. So I got 1,500 grit. I'm going to spritz on there with water, which I can do. Now I'm not going to go hog wild on this because this is not actually prepped, but I just want to show you. You can really feel the grit getting in there. Now I could go right on across here, but I'm going to actually, I would sand this, if I was really sanding this I'm not hardly doing much here. I just want to show you though. You start to see a slurry. That's the finish. That's the varnish coming off. And when you're working the edges, you always work from the inside out to the edge, and just be light about that, because it's easy to overdo the edge. If you're this way, you'll cut into it. So work out to the edge like that, and I double up like that, and I would just go right on around, have a good time.
What's a slurry? Can you tell me so I can show
This. Can you see that?
Okay.
It's the liquid. It's the water now with varnish dust.
Ah.
All right, so I'm not going to do any more on that, but I'll just, if you were doing this, you would sand, and then you would see it in the light, and you'd go until you see an even matte finish all around. Now, this is not going to show it. I probably rubbed through some, but then you're going to, it doesn't matter. This is just
After
demo.
all that. Yeah.
So I'm going to take this. I've got one more coat to put on this. Then I'm going to take my steel wool, and again, I'll go around, and this tung oil varnish takes to this really nicely. And I'd go right on around until I saw an even steel wool mat with that. Now I'm going to show you another table. I showed this briefly last week. This tabletop was rubbed out. This is Waterlock's tung oil varnish. The last coat I brushed on was really nice, and then and it was dried at least a week, and I leveled it with 1200 grit. Let me see if I can get it where you can really see it. Let's put a little polish on there. It's been a while. This is the Guardsman I'm using now. See what that looks like. So that is steel wooled after leveling with 1200 grit. I mean, it's so sweet. It's not overdone, but it's a beautiful finish that shows deep into the wood without being too bright and shiny and tacky looking. It's just got a gorgeous luster to it. Now, the nice thing is, you only have to really do that on the top. The entire base of this table was finished with shellac and rubbed out the way I just showed you with steel wool. Much less stress there because of the lack of concern for rubbing through, and you don't need the same kind of buildup of finish, and it's much faster drying. So this was finished when it was off the table. I didn't have it, so I put some finish on both sides so it would stabilize the top a bit. But I didn't put as many coats on the bottom as the top, but enough to keep it sealed. This is the top I already rubbed out with the steel wool. And check this out. I put a little indexing peg in the middle there, a 1/4 inch, and I have that hole a 1/4 inch in the middle, so that helped me to locate this pretty easily. And I also, because this was MDF, I put some 1/2 inch wood plugs right in the location. I took an awl and located and put those in there, because one thing about MDF is you don't always get the same purchase like with the screw. It's softer material, but once you put a wood plug in there, you've kind of created a little wooden purchase for these screws. So I just use these 1 inch, just little 1 inch drywall screws. They're black, so they look good. They go into the countersink nicely. And I'll put a little beeswax on there because it makes them go in easier. That was a thing Pug always did, and it makes a difference. You'd be surprised if you haven't tried it. And one block of beeswax will last you years. So these all kind of find the hole easily, and I'm just going to thread them in. These are small, so you don't really need a drill for this. It's old school.
Yes, Mark mentions that table Tom was telling you a moment ago that he made with David Lamb is in the newest issue of Fine Woodworking.
Oh yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, that very table I showed you, not that actual one, but one exactly like it. We made it together at the same time, And the finish on the top actually is in the magazine article. I know the finished one is that because we each did work on it for each other, so we each could have one. And we signed each other's tables. And so that was fun. That one has David's signature on it. And with mine, and he has one the same. But I know that finished one was rubbed out the exact same way. So when you see that in the article, that's exactly what you're seeing. I got the wax on the top of this one, and let's set it down. This is all I would cleaned up with
really
polish.
That's in progress.
Yeah, so we're seeing, look at underneath how that finishes there. Get the dust off. But you've got that nice black kind of contemporary look. Then with that sunburst, just explodes with color against the black. It just pops even more. But I'm going to put another coat on there. By the way, if you put polish on the surface and then you decide, oh shoot, I need another coat on there, wash it over with mineral spirits and a little steel wool. I usually do it a couple times. That removes any contaminants of any wax or anything, and you'll be good to go for another coat that finishes.
Are you familiar with Armor Seal? Ray's asking, and a couple other guys asking.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was actually trying to think of earlier. Armor Seal. They used to call it Royal Finish was their final, but they had Seal-A-Cell, and now I think it's Seal-A-Cell and Armor Seal.
They were answering that. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you guys. Okay. Yeah, that also, I would say that I would also use. I would put that behind, but comparable to using the water locks. The last, most critical point to finishing is keep moving forward. That's our goal, right? So even this 12-year chest, we're still moving forward. And doggone it, we're going to finish it. And the plan is next week.
Give up,
I got to get the bottoms
coming.
set, and we'll get the back on, and hopefully we'll have that to work. And I got to get the water locks on the top. So, hey, once again, thank you for hanging out with us. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe and hit that red bell and share and like and all that good stuff. We really couldn't do this without a supportive group, and we're blown away by the growing community and how much fun it is to share what we know, but our lives are actually been enriched so much by so many of you. So thanks for being a part of it, hanging out in the shop. We'll look forward to seeing you next week right back here on Shop Night Live. Good night, everybody.
Good night, friends.